fly fishing is different. I mean, it's yeah. I tell people that if it's not a philosophy, that there's at least a lot of philosophy in it. And, and Lefty Cray said there's more BS in fly fishing than in a Kansas City feedlot.
This week on the Remote No Pressure podcast, I'm super excited to be here. How are you, Bill?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks, yourself.
Doing awesome. We always have a great conversation before we start recording. And sometimes I think we probably would have to change the rating on the podcast.
Yeah. This is take two.
This is take two. You guys do not want to hear take one unless you're the cool dad.
The cool dads would let their kids listen to it. And,
yeah.
They'd be fine with it.
And then teach my kids all the swear words. Like, no. Yeah. Did you ever have a kid like that in school?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember his name?
It was Bill? I'm kidding.
No, I never had that. Or a stinky kid in class. That means you were the stinky kid in class. All right, I'm going to tell a story. So in middle school, my parents got divorced when I was 9, okay? And my dad and my stepmom, I'd been through some traumatic experiences, so they thought, let's send our son to Christian school. So for a lot of people that don't know, I have the worst gag reflex. I remember seeing my uncle had mud on his pants, on his jeans when I was a kid, and I thought it was dog poop, and I threw up. Yeah. And so I got one friend who walks around, even to this day, tries to make me gag so he can catch me on video and put it on YouTube.
Oh, you shouldn't be telling me this because now it's going to be me.
No, but that is me. So I get really sick to my stomach, right? So it was funny because we had gym in 9th grade, it was in 7th grade. 7th or 8th grade, and we were all kind of going through the change,
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden you don't smell like a puppy dog anymore, you're starting to,
Yep.
So we had PE, we had phys ed or gym, and then we'd have Bible class. Okay. So I'm not going to say the culprit's name, but there was a Italian kid in my class named Michael Hayes. Okay. So Michael Hayes, the thing with Michael is he was Italian and he would just say it like it is. Okay. And so we get back, no one wanted to shower because you're just odd, So there was one kid, I'm not going to say his name because it's being respectful, but he didn't know that he smelled like body odor yet. He didn't know the odor was there. So he would always come back to Bible class and I would try not to throw up because it was so raunchy. Okay. So one day it was real hot because we were in summer. We're in Texas, and it was hot. And this dude, he looked like he was 30, but he was in 7th grade. He had a full mustache. You know what I'm talking about?
What is in the water down there?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I didn't start drinking it till 11th grade though, whatever it was. Yeah. My voice didn't change till my sophomore year of college. No. So
I was a soprano in the choir.
So yeah, I was in varsity choir. I sang soprano. No, I can laugh at that now, but it was quite a treacherous journey. But so one day we would have gym, and then our last class was Bible class with Miss MacArthur. Okay, so one day it was always I was always there, and I'd always try not to gag, and I did okay. I would do okay, but that day was pizza day, and so our Christian school, we didn't have a cafeteria. We ate in the gym, and they would bring in pizza, and I ate way too much food and everything, and so I was
you didn't puke it up during gym class?
I didn't puke it up during gym class, but it was there. It was there. It's there.
Mm-hmm.
And after gym class, we go up to our Bible class, okay? And normally I'm okay. I would kind of dry heave, but it wasn't to the extent I'm going to puke. Well, this day, it was an extremely hot day, and this kid, I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to embarrass him, he was rotten. Just absolutely putrid. And I think there were some other kids in the class too because it was so hot. And so the funk in the classroom was so bad, I start you know, like, you know.
You're gonna make some of the listeners
Yeah.
do that too. Oh, they're driving.
Oh my gosh, yeah, exactly. So I'm like trying not to dry heat, but it's too much, you know. And then you start to get flushed, you know, and you get that water in your mouth. You know, everybody who's listening right now knows exactly what I'm talking. So my mouth was like,
there's a storm a brewing.
Oh yeah, there's something going on down there. And so I hightail it out of the room, down the hall to the bathroom, and I just start puking, and I am puking, and I am puking. And then here comes Michael Hayes, the big Italian. He looks at the kid and goes, see, I told you, you stink, you stink, you stink. When are you going to start wearing deodorant? And he just like, the big Italian kid goes like off on this other kid, you know. And to this day, I feel bad for the kid, you know. That smelled really bad.
That was probably a life-changing experience for him.
Well, he started wearing deodorant after that. But like, I will never forget that. How did we get on this subject?
See, to you, those were the stinky kids, but to them, you were the puker.
I was a puker.
You guys remember old Troutman, the puker in high school?
Yeah, the old guy. I swore he shaved his legs till 11th grade. God, I hated middle school, man. I hate it. He's the worst. But yeah. Well, Troutman, he sang soprano in the varsity choir. That was me.
If I could go back now with a beard and be the cool kid.
The problem is I still can't grow a good beard. I still can't. It's still a Patch Adams. I didn't start shaving until I was in college, and it was like a once a week thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like,
I didn't have a full beard till I was 25.
Really?
Yep.
It's like I look at these guys, right, in fly fishing. They have these big epic beards, you know, and I'm like, I got beard envy.
I know. Mike can only grow so far too. You know, before they call it terminal.
Okay.
That's the longest it'll grow. And then there's dudes who will have it like down past their belly button.
Like ZZ Top.
Yeah.
I mean,
just good genes.
I don't want it down to like too far. But it's kind of like a trend right now.
You could get a patch on, a strap on beard.
Actually, a weave.
Yeah.
Some people wear a weave. Okay. No, I swear to you, because, a lot of people see me wear a hat. And, I happen to be...
With that ponytail at the back?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No, it's like I'm follically challenged. What is it? Follically challenged. Yes. Careful. Going back to take one. Follicle challenged, And so I wear a hat a lot. I may or may not have done internet research on how to... God, why am I telling thousands of people this? So
it's your transparency.
It's my
your honesty that people appreciate.
It's my story.
That's why they keep tuning in.
It's my story. God. So, anyways,
we're just a step away from a Lifetime channel show.
One sentence away. No, so I may or may not have researched male hair regrowth. May or may not have. Okay, I did.
I'm like, all I got to do is search your history. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Deleting it. My wife's like, you really gonna pull? No, just
follicle regrowth,
hair growth. Oh, well, here you go. I've got some pulled up for you. No, yeah, but anyway, so the weave is a common thing.
Yeah,
in some cultures.
Yeah,
the females wear the weave. Well, I guess there is a male weave.
I don't know if I'd be comfortable with that off your face.
It's on your head.
Oh, okay.
On your head, it is. So for people that are experiencing that kind of thing, you can actually have a weave, and you can go to the weave shop, like this barber. I think it was on Vice or someone like, I don't know.
Yeah, they cover everything on Vice.
Yeah, and they showed this barber is real cool. He's putting weaves, and I'm like, where exactly is this shop? I could get like one of those weave haircuts.
Where do you go for weave school?
I don't think there is, that is an interesting thing you bring up. This has nothing to do with fly fishing, by the way. But I guess this is what we talk about around the campfire at Trout Camp. Okay, so I guess there's like not a license, and you know how I feel about licenses for getting a haircut. They're not licensed or regulated, and the government wants to regulate weaves.
Mm-hmm.
Because they say it's like, haircuts or whatever. So there's a lot of people who have these shops and businesses around weaves
that are They're running dirty.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and there was another guy that was making gold grills for teeth.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I just read this. I read this article. This guy making gold grills. So you give him like a thing of your teeth. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like a wax mold.
A mold. Yeah.
A mold, right, for your teeth. And you give it to him, and he would make you like a gold grill. And he was not an orthodontist. I'm not sure his level of education, but let's just say he didn't go to medical school.
Yeah.
Okay. So, or dentistry school or orthodontic
So long as he
school.
didn't claim to be like Dr. Grills.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, so I guess like he had been making, he has a huge business like in Florida where he made gold grills for people or grills, custom grills. And I saw the headline because I like grilling food and I'm thinking like, oh, custom grills, but it was actually the grill on your teeth. And the government came in and were like, they took him to jail, fined him and said, you're practicing dentistry without a license. And he'd been in business for years. Yeah. He didn't even know he was breaking the law. And he got fined. But I digress on that whole subject. This week's guest, Mr. Aaron Reed. We can get back to the flight. But this is what we talk about. I was
going to say, check out our Amazon store. We're selling weaves and grills.
Yeah, our next dropship item will be male weaves. And you can see that. Oh, God, I got to get one. How can we obtain such an item? I would totally wear that and put it on the Instagram if I had a male weave.
Like, would you do dreads? Would you do like a weave of dreads?
This intro's gone long enough, so I'm not going to go into that. But let's just put it this way: when I was in middle school, I wanted to be a skateboarder.
All right.
And I wanted to grow my weave out, but you couldn't wash your hair for like 3 months, and so with my gag reflex,
and we've come full circle.
It just didn't work out, and we've come full circle. Here we are. This week's guest is an unbelievable person, Mr. Aaron Reed, who is a writer. He's a published writer. He has magazine. He's been in magazines. Just an awesome person, an awesome human being, who has helped the show a lot, promoted the show, and just a good person. And he has a book coming out here pretty soon, so he'll probably be back on the show when he gets his book out. But we wanted to have him on. He's a good dude, and he also is a tugboat driver down in Houston.
That would be a fun job.
Or on the Gulf, not necessarily in Houston, but on the Corpus Christi Bay. And yeah.
Weird story. I just heard of there's an Ark replica in Holland, not Michigan, in the Netherlands.
Where is that? Where? Okay, go ahead.
In the Netherlands, this dude made a replica Ark, and he's towing it to Israel with a tugboat. So his bill is going to be like an astronomical bill from this tugboat captain to tow it to Israel. But he wanted to give it to Israel or bring it to Israel. But
does Israel know this thing's coming?
I don't know. They're going to be surprised and like, uh-oh.
Here's your Ark. We never really wanted that. Like,
do we have to sign for it? Because
it's COD. It's COD.
Oh.
Darn it. I mean, what do you do with that?
Where do you store it?
Talk about an awkward Christmas gift, Like, how do you react when you open that one?
Oh, thanks.
Here's your Ark. It's a gift. It's like, I don't want it all. We're very excited to have Aaron. We're very excited to have you guys here on the Remote No Pressure podcast, as always. And we're so excited to get to this interview with Mr. Aaron Reed. Welcome to the podcast. Let's light the fire. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Aaron. And you're one of our earliest listeners, and we've always kind of been in touch. We've never formally met, but there's been a lot of emails back and forth, and I just really appreciate your encouragement with the podcast, and hearing from you. And you've recommended guests on the show and things like that, and I just really appreciate that. Tell us a little bit about how you got into fly fishing. I mean, you were born in Rockport, Texas, correct?
Well, I was actually born in Nacogdoches. My dad was.
And were you raised there in deep East Texas?
No, I don't even remember it.
Okay.
My dad was a student at Stephen F. Austin when I was born, and we didn't stay there too long, moved back to the coast, and both my parents were raised in Rockport, and I grew up there too, surrounded by a large family and a number of classmates of my parents. It was real hard to get away with anything in Rockport when I was a kid. Probably saved my life, but so there wasn't a lot to do down there except duck hunt and fish, and I did a lot of sailing when I was young, and hang out with the family, and it was kind of a pretty perfect childhood looking back on it.
Wow. That's incredible. Now, after the last hurricane down there, Harvey, I mean, was Rockport like completely wiped out almost? I mean, didn't they get a lot of damage with Harvey?
Yeah. The storm actually came ashore over just north of Rockport, kind of over the Lamar Holiday Beach area, and there was a whole lot of damage. I think between all our family members, we've got like maybe 7 or 8 houses down there and one business. And thankfully, all of the damage to our family's properties was pretty light. But there were a lot of homes that were completely destroyed, businesses that were wiped out, and it's been a long road to recovery down there. I mean, the town's open; it's up and running. People should definitely call a guide down there and go red fishing or something. But it's been hard, and one of the biggest problems is that a lot of the older homes that maybe weren't built to modern codes, and also maybe didn't have insurance, got completely destroyed. And sadly, those people can't afford to rebuild. So there's a real issue with kind of working class people being able to find affordable housing down there, which then in turn impacts the service economy, the hotels and the restaurants and bars and all of that sort of thing. So I don't know what the solution is or how they'll recover from that, but it's a hard thing.
Yeah, that's crazy. I spent a lot of my young childhood in East Texas, but also on the Gulf of Mexico, there in Lake Jackson, Freeport. I was born in Bay City, just
right.
all up and down the coast there. And, we would fish a lot for, speckled trout, kingfish, redfish. We would throw like spoons, red and white hoagies, on spinning gear. But how did you end up fly fishing, Aaron? I mean, you grew, I'm not sure, but I know me growing up, like fly fishing was for these people way up north, like in Montana and stuff, not for us in the salt, How did you find out about it? How did you get into fly fishing, Aaron?
Yeah, I think it was just because of the phenomenal flats fishing down there. And, and we've been doing it for years with conventional gear. And people started coming down with fly rods, and we started hearing about this and, seeing some people out there doing, that kind of weird twirly ballet-like thing out on the bow of the boat. Like, what the heck is that,
Uh-huh.
I had an uncle who owned the tackle store in Rockport for a while, and so he got some fly rods in, and I'm like, hey, Unc, what's this all about? And he said, let me tell you something. He said, fly fishing, it ain't about catching fish. It's about communing with the water column. And
you say it with such a good accent too, Aaron.
Yeah, and he'd been a gill netter when so and a commercial fisherman. So, and he's not all wrong about that. But I really do like to catch fish. So that's how I got started. I got started with an 8-weight on the salt, fishing for redfish and trout. And I wasn't really committed to it. I take the 8-weight, but I take my bait casters too. And but I was really into sight fishing and throwing topwaters and watching a fish explode on a topwater and that kind of thing. And so the fly fishing's work, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And so I'd throw the fly rod for about 30 minutes and I'd say, screw this, and pick up the bait caster. And that went on until probably the early 2000s, and I went to work for Texas Parks and Wildlife Department in Austin. And one of the things I did while I was there is I was an angler education area chief, and we'd have these retreats every year, 2 or 3 days somewhere, and it would all be seminars on fishing and different fishing techniques. And one of the guys there was an FFI certified instructor, and he was kind enough to spend a day with me. And I started catching fish on purpose with my fly rod, which was a real thrill. And it kind of went from there. And I was still it was just another tool in the quiver for a long time. Some days were good fly rod days, some days were good conventional days. And it wasn't until, even after I lived up here, I go fly fishing, but it was just like to keep in practice to go down to the coast. I'd go throw flies at carp, and because I thought carp, that's a lot like a redfish, it's good practice. And I didn't know carp were supposed to be hard. I caught a bunch of them. Since I started targeting carp, man, those fish are tough. So I did that for a while, and I was out on the, I wasn't dumb enough to think that an 8-weight was appropriate for our little rivers up here. So I was out there with like a 5-weight or something, and still catching a lot of, 14-inch bass and sunfish and whatnot. And I was like, this isn't very much fun. And I was out on the San Gabriel one day with my wife and kids, and I paddled past this guy, and he had this tiny little fly rod. And I'm like, hey, man, what is that? And he goes, oh, it's a 2-weight. I'm like, a 2-weight? I didn't even know they made them. So I went and started looking at ultralight fly fishing rods, and so now I own way too many 1, 2, and 3 weights, and I'm just happy as can be. I mean, a 3-weight is, for me, the perfect rod. You can handle a big fish if you need to, but all those little fish, which are 80% of the fish in any river, are a ton of fun. So that's what I've been doing for about the past 3 years, and I've got some very nice conventional gear that has not seen sunlight in quite a while.
That's crazy. That's awesome how that works, and just trying to discover the craft, and it takes a little while. I sent you some pictures last weekend from our trout camp, and I was up fishing for steelhead. I was throwing streamers, I was throwing egg patterns, and trying to catch lake run browns, and like, yeah. I have my spinning gear with me because I've caught so many fish on my spinning gear, and when the fly rod's not producing, I want to switch back. But this was a time when I really focused in on my 8. I have an 8-weight for that, and just really trying to catch those bigger steelhead, and just a lot of fun. But it takes a little bit. You can't, Dave Karzinski's book From Lure to Fly, that book has really helped me out a lot too, just making that transition, and it's been a real godsend just reading up on that, and how similar, like up here, the way we fish for steelhead and trout with spinning gear, I've always used like a like yarn or an egg pattern type thing this time of year, even on my spinning gear. So it's not really that much different than the way my spinning gear is set up, unless I'm throwing streamers. But yeah, it's an interesting transition, that's for sure.
It is, and I try to encourage people that. I mean, fly fishing is different, I mean, it's, yeah, I tell people that, if it's not a philosophy, that there's at least a lot of philosophy in it. And, and Lefty Cray said there's more BS in fly fishing than in a Kansas City feedlot. So there's that too. But everything that anyone has learned as a conventional angler pretty much applies in fly fishing. I mean, the fish are going to eat the same kinds of imitations. They're going to they're going to be lying in the same place. They're going to need the same kind of presentation for the most part. So all the things that a conventional angler has learned along the way will help him or her become a better fly fisherman, I think. I don't know. I mean, it's just my preferred way to do things these days, and I mean, I suppose I'll probably pick up a baitcaster or a spinning rod again. I mean, I don't know, but I haven't felt compelled yet in the last 3 years. And I feel like with fly fishing, I'm never going to get to the end of it. You know, I mean, there's my cast is a lot better now than it was 15 years ago or even 3 years ago. But I imagine I'll still be improving it, you know, in another 3 or 15 years. I learn more about fish all the time. I just enjoy the absolute requirement to live in the moment when I'm on the water.
Yeah, it's definitely an eternal pursuit, you know, and you're never gonna master it, I don't think, but it's definitely something that goes on and continue learning. Just to change subjects a little bit. Now, you worked for the government for a long time, right? I mean, in 2010, that was kind of a turning point from you, right? I mean, you were one of your jobs at the VA was to write the overnight report. Can you tell us a little bit about that and that whole situation?
Yeah, so I started writing when I was in college. You know, I went to school at a little Catholic liberal arts college in Irving. I'm sure you've seen the brick bell tower there.
My office was not too far from there. I worked in Las Colinas.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
So I know right where you were. Yep.
Yeah, and we also had Trinity River frontage on the other side of 114 there, so I could sneak down there and go fishing. But
God, I just love the names like 114. Like, please take me back. I want to go visit. Anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
I know, right?
I totally threw you off. I'm sorry about that. So.
No problem. So after my second junior year, I had an opportunity to go to Washington and work in doing some kind of writing and research stuff for you know, a political figure, and that turned into like a real job. And you know, all of a sudden I'm 21 years old and I'm, you know, making you know, at least $25,000 a year. Woohoo! And I was super excited to be independent. And I was on an extended leave of absence from college, and I never went back. And I just kind of kept doing the writing and media stuff, and came back to Texas. I was a reservist. My unit got mobilized to go to Bosnia. And I started off as a field artilleryman, and quickly figured out that you know, hunting 100-pound artillery rounds was not my thing, and had the opportunity to transfer over to a different MOS, which was 46 Quebec, a photojournalist. So I did that. So my job in Bosnia was to go out in the field and like interview soldiers and escort media and run a field newspaper, and it was a pretty cool job. And I got back and went to work full time for the Texas National Guard and doing public affairs stuff, and that was cool. And from there, I went to Child Protective Services in Texas for 4 years, and had 30 Central Texas counties for 2 years, and then I went down to South Texas and was working out of Corpus and Edinburgh and had all those counties. And at the time, my oldest boy was a young child, and so I was dealing with a lot of child fatalities and just kind of horrific abuse and neglect cases, and some of which were cases where the agency I worked for had dropped the ball, you know, and others in which the agency I worked for was the biggest problem that the family we were involved with had dealt with. So it was incredibly stressful, and so from there, I'm like, well, I need to find a different job. And I'm like, hey, I'll go to work for Parks and Wildlife Department. And, the worst thing I'll ever have to talk about there is like chronic wasting disease in deer or, a red tide event or something down on the coast. And it turned out that one of my jobs there was to talk about boating fatalities. We had 54 one of the years I was there. So, I mean, I won't say that was incredibly stressful. It was a great job and it was a great learning experience. I got to do a lot of outdoor writing, and I did a lot of writing on the side for regional publications then. And then Hurricane Ike came through. So I was in Anahuac, just across the bay from Baytown. So we were in Anahuac, and when the eye wall of Ike came over, and I was out there with the game wardens, initially doing search and rescue, and then recovery operations, looking for bodies, and I was out there for 17 days with them, and that was kind of I was like, okay, that's I need to do something else now. Meanwhile, I'd been divorced for years at that point, and I ran into a girl I'd gone to high school with, and we ended up getting together, and a romance blossomed, and so I followed her back to the city I said I would never live in again, Dallas, and needed a job up there, and so I went to work for the VA as a writer, editor, and so one of my jobs there, I mean, it seemed pretty innocuous, I worked in an office. We're helping people. It was the Texas Healthcare Network, so we had all the hospitals in Texas and a few in Oklahoma. But one of my jobs was to write the overnight report to then Secretary Shinseki. And man, we, as a nation, I think we fail our veterans in lots of ways. But certainly sometimes with the health care we provide or the availability of care, especially mental health care. And it was just death by suicide after death by suicide of people in our care or who should have been in our care. And it got to the point where I ended up with a bleeding ulcer and ended up in the hospital. And my wife said, "You can't keep doing this. What do you want to do?" And I'm like, "Well, I want to go drive boats." And she's like, "Well, that's a change," And
for sure.
I'm like, "Yeah." So I did. I went and got my captain's license and dragged the family down to South Padre, and I ran charter boats and tour boats down there for a while, and guided for a year, which was like way hard work. And I have great respect for guys and gals who do that and do a great job because it's really tough. I wasn't much good at it. And from there, I went out to work in the oil field and ended up on tugboats. And so that's where I am now. And I'm the third generation of my family to work in the Port of Corpus Christi, as it turns out. My grandfather was a sailor, and I remember going to visit his ship down there back in the 70s, when he was in port. My dad was in the Coast Guard and was home ported in Corpus Christi on a big Coast Guard cutter back in the 60s. And my brother and I both work there now. My brother's a port police officer and runs all their patrol boats. So,
wow.
That's the day job.
Well, hey guys, thank you so much for joining us this week on the Remote No Pressure podcast. We're just going to take a minute to share with you a little bit about a company that we've partnered with, Flood Tide. Paul Puckett, Art, and Paul Puckett and the boys over at Flood Tide have been extremely generous with us this year and offered our listeners a 25% discount code when you type in Remote No Pressure at checkout. I've always been a fan of the Southern lifestyle, being from Texas, which is more of a Southwest style, but the southern style of the seafood, the redfish, the awesome fishing, and just the culture of the South, and nothing captures that better than Flood Tide. I think they're a great company, they're great quality of product. So be sure to check them out at floodtideco.com. Enter in remote no pressure at checkout to receive a 25% discount on your order. Also, if you're looking for unique stocking stuffers, check out remotenopressure.com. We have our Songs About Fly Fishing album and also some really cool decals over there that would make the perfect gift. Well, let's get back to the podcast. It reminds me of a song by a guy named Robert Earl Keen, Corpus Christi Bay, right?
Yeah, me and my brother. I think about that all the time. My brother will pull the patrol boat up to the tugboat, and we'll talk over the railing, almost every week I'm down there, or have a cup of coffee or something. And, I think about that a lot.
So do you do any fly fishing from the tugboat there? I mean, I've seen some pictures on your social media, but or is it just strictly business when you're out there working?
Yeah, we absolutely do. Turns out a tugboat is a really lousy fly fishing skiff. We draw about 15 feet of water. But we make a point of tying up near dock lights some evenings, and there are lots of redfish and trout under those lights. And there's actually a little creek that comes into the harbor right next to our office and our main dock, and that little creek has a mangrove snapper and tarpon and snook in it. So yeah, I do take a fly rod to the boat, and some weeks I do get to fish.
That's amazing. Have you been able to introduce any of your mates to fly fishing on the boat?
Yeah, for sure. There's one of my deckhands last year. I was out just casting or something. He's like, I've always, he's kind of a country boy. He's like one of the smartest guys I know, but he sounds and looks very country. He's like, I've always wanted to do that, but it looks too hard. I'm like, here, try it, And within 30 minutes, he was making 50, 60-foot casts. And he's like, oh, I got to get one of these, but it's too expensive. Now, this is a guy with a $50,000 flats boat, right? He runs down to for big trout, but he thinks the fly rod's too expensive. And I'm like, man, Justin, this rod right here is like, it's a TFO. It's like $200, and it's not going to cost you that much. Go down to Roy's, get you one, whatever. And he's like, oh, my wife's going to hate you. But he did it, man. He went down and got his own 8-weight, and he's fly fishing now, so, that was fun, man. That was a real win. I think introducing him to that.
Why do you think fly fishing has such a reputation, like an elitist reputation or a very expensive reputation? Why do you think that is? What do you think early fly anglers did that intentionally, or did that just kind of happen? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think part of it has to do with it being kind of, I think a lot of it has to do with the English or British origins of the sport, or at least the sport in America. And the fact that in Great Britain, most water is private. So you had to be a member of, the landed gentry or have a lot of money to go fishing. And so it kind of restricted the sport there. And I think some of that was imported to the U.S. That's one reason. I think another reason is that there are a lot of companies that have figured out that they can charge, $800 or $1,000 for fly rod, and people will pay it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not knocking that. There's some, there are some rods I would definitely pay $800 for. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of folks who might be interested in sport are under the mistaken impression that that's the only way they can get into the sport. And we are in such a heyday of really terrific budget-friendly equipment right now. I mean, we have $150 rods right now that are better than anything our grandparents could have put their hands on.
True. And I think we're also seeing a big change too in the demographic in fly fishing. And you recently did something, speaking of changing of the demographic, you just recently did something with Pig Farm Inc. down in Austin, right?
Yeah, man, that was so much fun. As a matter of fact, Jeff, next year you've got to come down I'm sure you've got pig farm events up there, but do you ever come back to Texas, by the way? I mean, do you still have family here?
Oh, yeah. So my parents live over in Cove, which is across from Anahuac. I think that's the Trinity right there. So my parents my whole family lives there. I'm the only, I've got one cousin out east, in the Northeast, but yeah, I come back. I don't go back enough. I want to come back more this year, this coming year in 2019. That's kind of my goal, but yeah.
So in 2019, I mean, I know you probably have to do your trips around the kids' school schedule and whatever else. If you can, we will organize a pig farm event based upon your availability. How about that?
Dude, we can do it. We'll have a great time. My kids go to this weird school. They go to school year round. And, and so they're off 1 week every 6 weeks. And it's like an international school, so we can travel whenever we want. It's pretty sweet. It's a pretty sweet setup, actually. So
perfect.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, but it works for us, and our kids do amazing, and it's pretty challenging. But yeah, that's great. Yeah, man. Well, let's do it. I'm totally down for that because, dude, I've met so many awesome people down there over the podcast and stuff. It's like, why are there so many awesome people in Texas fly fishing, and I couldn't find anyone that fly fished when I was growing up, And yeah, I wanted to come back to this. Speaking of fishing the flats, okay? Rumor has it, and I don't know how familiar you are with Texas history. I mean, you worked with Texas Park and Wildlife and all that. So I don't know how familiar you are with the history of the salt water there in the fishery. But rumor has it down in Freeport, Texas, there were tons of tarpon at one time.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. All up and down the coast. So, tarpon are still a little bit of a mystery. I think the biologists now think that all of the tarpon, that the big tarpon that we see throughout the Caribbean and around the Gulf Coast, all the way to Florida, are one big population that starts in the Yucatan or Bay of Campeche and then splits and migrates. One goes clockwise around the Gulf, the other goes counterclockwise, and they, maybe they meet at Boca Grande or something, where that really terrific fishery is, and then they turn around and come back. And so in Texas, we get the migratory fish usually in the fall, maybe starting in late July or sometime in August, and they'll stick around through Thanksgiving or the first really severe cold front or red tide, which this cold front that just came through may have knocked them down south. But we also have a ton of juvenile tarpon in our bays, in our river systems here. It seems to be on the uptick from what I can tell. But definitely before all the reservoirs were built in Texas in the 1950s, there seemed to have been a lot more tarpon in Texas bays all up and down the coast. And if you want to catch tarpon now around Freeport, you can go offshore, off Galveston Island, and there are some pretty great tarpon fishing during the migration in the fall. But during the winter, those smaller juvenile tarpon will stack up in the Dow chemical hot water outflows on the.
Sure. I know right where those are.
Yeah. Hey, well, good. You should go there. Because there are also snook there in the wintertime. So we seem to be doing a little better, but it seems like the damming of the rivers was really what kind of curtailed things, starting in the 50s for snook and tarpon.
Yeah, my whole theory was, and mind you, it's not based on any scientific research or evidence whatsoever, but my whole theory, which I will share with anyone, even though it's not backed by anything. But I always thought, with Dow Chemical and Phillips and Exxon and all the refineries and stuff down on that Gulf Coast area, I mean, that caused a lot of pollution. And then also, I mean, just the mouth of the Brazos there, where it comes in, and there's so many rivers that dump in right there. It's just it's so polluted, And so my whole thought was maybe that's what drove them out, but that could be absolutely wrong. It sounds to me like yours holds a lot more water than mine. No pun intended. So,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, it could be. When I was working for Parks and Wildlife, we were working in conjunction with the Texas Health Department, and they had just done this massive study in Galveston Bay on PCBs and dioxins in speckled trout, flounder, redfish, and catfish, and crabs. And they had analyzed 1,000 fish, and it cost, I think it cost $1,000 a fish to do this. So it was a lot of money. That'd be $1 million, right? So, I mean, I'm not much good at math. That's why I write, but so maybe it wasn't that much, but it was a lot of money. And anyway, they put out a consumption advisory and said that nobody should eat more than 8 ounces of wild caught fish in Galveston Bay, per month, and pregnant women and children should avoid it altogether. Nobody paid attention to that whatsoever. And I remember talking to one of the scientists from the health department, and I was like, so that's really weird that this would only apply to Galveston Bay, but Nueces Bay, near Corpus with all those refineries, or the lower Laguna Madre near Brownsville or whatever, that you guys didn't find the same thing there. And he said, we haven't had the money to test those.
Oh my, that's insane.
Yeah.
So they only had the dough to really look in Galveston Bay and nowhere else. So, wow.
Yeah. And it was just spotted sea trout and catfish, by the way. So there's something about speckled trout and catfish. They process these pollutants differently, even though they're eating mostly the same things as flounder and redfish. The flounder and redfish were fine, and the speckled trout were not. So, I mean, out of all the bad things I do to my body, eating fish a couple of times a month is probably not high on the list, but I've kind of shied away from speckled trout since then.
Wow, that's interesting. That's probably a good idea. I love some blackened redfish, though. That's that's my jam. Or I remember going offshore as a kid, catching big red snapper and bringing them in, and just fresh snapper. Yeah. Holy, off the rigs,
And red snapper and flounder are my 2 favorite fish to eat. Those, as a matter of fact, I mean, those are really the only 2 fish that I'll keep anymore.
Speaking of flounder, do you catch them on the fly?
Yeah, surprisingly, I've caught quite a few on fly.
Because they're bottom eaters, right? They eat off the bottom.
They're not. I mean, they lay on the bottom, but they lay there with their 2 eyeballs looking up, and they'll. I mean, if you ever get to see one do it in clear water, I mean, they actually kind of flop up off the bottom and grab stuff. And I've actually even had them grab surface lures and dry flies.
Really?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, they'll come all the way up off the bottom in 2 or 3 feet of water and smack something on the top. And they're just a ton of fun on the fly rod.
Isn't that something? We caught them. We would catch them on shrimp, or some kind of live bait type thing like that. But I didn't know. I didn't know they would come up like that. That's crazy. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, the best way to get them is a clouser. I mean, something that's a little heavier that you can hop past them on the bottom. But yeah, they'll readily take a fly, and they're a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So you have your book coming out here, the spring of 2020, but we also have the links that you sent me to some of your blogs, also to your Instagram, and we want to keep in touch with you, Aaron, on what you're doing, where you're headed, and things like that. So I will share all those links. But if someone wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that, Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, the best way is probably through my rather moribund. The best way is probably through my rather moribund blog, Blue Collar Fly Fishing. It's just Aaron at bluecollarflyfishing.com. Yeah, I mean, that's just email me or you can get a hold of me through my publisher through the link that you're putting up on the website.
Okay. Well, we'll put that out there, Aaron, and thank you very much for spending some time with us. We really appreciate it.
Hey, Jeff, thank you. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the podcast and what you're doing. I almost feel like you're an evangelist, spreading the good word of fly fishing, and I really appreciate it. I look forward to every episode that you put out.
All right. Thanks a lot. That means a lot. Thanks, Aaron.
Well, hey, you guys, thank you so much again for listening to our podcast. We're so appreciative every week. Next week, we have we've been in Texas a lot on the podcast. We've been talking to a lot of Texans, and that was not by design. It just happened that way. And next week, I'm very excited to bring it back to the Midwest. We're going to be, Bill and I last year went up to a cabin. We were graciously invited to someone's cabin, and we were able to record some awesome interviews. And we're very excited about next week, and some native Michiganders that are going to be on the podcast. We're very excited about that. So stay tuned to that. And until next time, go fishing.